Hello and welcome into Slick Talk. This is your host, Joe. Today's episode is titled Winter is Coming, because while we are in the throes of fall, enjoying ourselves, full disclosure, I have a piping hot mug of apple cider right now. I'm cultivating the fall mood. Monday Night Football is playing. I have some apple cider in the mug, enjoying the excellent weather we're having right now. I mean, we're not going to get into a debate on the best season, but everyone knows that it is fall. However, with winter on the horizon, people are rightfully so wondering what you should do with oil changes before or after you put that car into winter storage. And credit to listener, supporter of the show, Daniel, for bringing this topic up again. If you want us to cover anything in particular, and it's something we can speak to directly, we will. Just reach out by phone or email. The phone number is 260-744-2380. Email bstone@blackstone-labs.com. So before we get into the topic specifically, I had a little bit of a sidebar I wanted to dig into, because the question is just one that's going to come up so often. I want to return to it every now and then, even though we have, an episode or two focused on the topic. But that is extended oil change intervals, how to go about it, how we approach that. And it was also came to mind because of something that I did recently that some might describe as crazy. And that is, I ran 20 miles this past weekend. And, I think I have all my marbles still, I swear, folks. I mean, it's been a heck of a year, but I think I still am keeping it together. So I ran 20 miles on purpose. I was not, held at gunpoint. I did it because I wanted to, because I'm training for a marathon. It's going to be virtual because everyone knows right now regular life just isn't happening. But nevertheless, people who want to do crazy things like run a marathon are going to find a way to do them independently. And so I was doing this 20-mile run, and I thought, the whole time I was just thinking about what I had done before and imagining asking my body to do this had I not already put in all the conditioning and all the time to reach the point where I could just run 3 hours straight and not worry about it. And it just relates so much to extended oil use too, because just like the human body, an engine is going to respond differently based on how long you're running the oil. Not only that, you're going to have differences, even if you take two engines of the same make, same model. You have one owner asking an engine to do short trips, hauling heavy loads, higher RPMs, whatever you want to call it, whatever fits under the umbrella of harder use. And then you have another owner of that same engine in the same car, but they are doing constant highway travel at steady RPMs and easy conditions that don't call for the engine to make much metal. They just have samples with a consistently strong TBN. What you are asking an engine to do and seeing how it responds, the process of learning what it's capable of is really similar to when you're training for a crazy goal like a marathon. And it also plays into why we suggest oil change intervals the way we do. So if you sampled with us often, you know that typically we extend oil change intervals fairly gradually, like 2,000 miles at a time, unless you're, in some sort of long haul application. You have, some bigger diesel engines are kind of exceptions to the rule where we might get a little bit more liberal and say 5,000, 10,000, get a little bit more crazy, but that also is dependent on trends. But in general, you need to take things gradually to see how the engine handles it. So often people will say, well, I've run 5,000 miles consistently. It's what the owner's manual calls for. And, well, I'm just ready to do 15,000 because that's what the bottle says I can do. That's what the label says. It says good for 15, so 15 it is. And you don't really contextualize just how big of a jump that is, and especially if you don't have a good familiarity with the engine and how it wears from one oil run to the next, you don't quite realize how much you're asking there, how much is unknown. And truthfully, there is a lot until you've built up an established sample history and you haven't really taken that gradual approach to see how things are going. And it's just the same, when I started running, the long runs went from 7 miles one weekend to 9 miles, dropped back down a little bit, and then extended out to 10 to 12. And then it's just so similar. It struck such a chord, especially this past weekend, because I knew that I could expect my legs to be able to carry me 20 miles because I had done 18 miles the previous week and felt pretty good. So 20 is reasonable, and mentally I was able to clear that hurdle and do it confidently because I knew how my body responded after a half marathon, after 16, 18, so on. It's just like that with an engine, because building up patterns and seeing how that oil holds up as well, that's all so crucial, and it's all part of it. So whether it's man, whether it's machine, take it easy, rely on history. And no, this isn't just some sort of like plug to be like, we need all of your money, sample. Like it's just the way it's the way science works. It's the way logic works. One sample can be a fluke. 2 samples with similar results, it's not quite a trend. But when you have consistency across 3 samples and more, well, then you're getting into some pretty concrete patterns, and that's what you can trust when you extend oil change intervals. So jumping off of that, I want to switch gears to something of an exciting change taking place on the website. That is the blackstone-labs.com website, specifically the Slick Talk podcast page, which you can find under the info tab on the website. So we've been sprucing this page up. I've been working on it on the side as far as building up links to where you can find the show, but also adding our Slick Talk swag to the website. Shirts and hats. I'm excited about it. The designs have been rolling in. The orders have been rolling in. If you have requested a special size, bear with us. We're getting those in. As many folks out there can imagine, it is a challenge shipping-wise to get products in, especially whether it's special sizes or if we're not, ordering a huge bulk order and we just need to get a couple random sizes in. It can take a little bit of time. We're working on it, and it's just been great having the feedback on the apparel. It's just something that I thought about one day, because not only has the fan support been so great with reviews, and thanks to everyone for sending those in. I even put a few up on the website just to, kind of give you another shout out, another thank you for posting them. But having that fan support, we just wanted to find more ways that we could let people, support the show just like they have been. And what better way than to have some apparel that you can wear, especially well-designed apparel. I love how they came out. And all of the design work for our show, whether it was the actual show logo, the clothing, the intro music you hear at the start of this podcast, It's all done by local talent in Fort Wayne, and it's been cool to incorporate, just other artists, people who have been interested in taking part in the show. So when you buy a shirt, a hat, when you listen to the show, when you give it a review, you're supporting, not just myself, my co-producer Kyle. You're also supporting a lot of local talent in town that we've been able to connect with. So it's just been a really positive experience across the board. And now we do have a little bit of an exciting announcement. And that is, I got off the phone today with a new friend, Adam, of Airplane Intel Podcast. Adam and I were talking about sitting down and doing a show that will be on Airplane Intel Podcast. You can find them on Apple Podcasts. If you have been a listener of this show and you've been itching to get more aircraft-related topics, aircraft-specific stuff, well, this is going to be the opportunity. We're going to schedule a recording session here within the next week, so I'm going to keep the Slick Talk community posted on that for when we do the show. I'm really looking forward to it. It's another benefit of doing this podcast is making those connections with shows that are similar to ours, and that, tapping into the enthusiasm and the interests of our customers. And better yet, just building connections and just growing the foundation of the show, raising more awareness of our program and other shows like ours. It's great to see the support that these shows have. So we look forward to announcing the specific date of the Aircraft Intel podcast, and we'll definitely keep you all up to date on that. Okay, so let's move to the main event. The subject of the show, winter is coming. So what we're talking about here is, what do you need to do? What do you need to think about from a maintenance standpoint before you put whatever it may be, a car, aircraft, boat, into storage for winter, and what you need to do coming out. And I want to look at just a couple of easy answers first. Because when we get to engine oil, that's going to be a bit more involved. So let's just talk about differential, transmission, transfer case. These are outliers because you don't need to worry about changing those systems, the oil that they need to run. You don't need to worry about dumping that before storage or after. We're talking about systems here, especially when you get into transmissions. I mean, closed lubrication systems, they're simply not going to be susceptible to the oil breaking down. And you don't need to worry about anything going wrong, from a metal standpoint. You're not going to have just these unruly spikes in metal, coming out of a winter hibernation. You're not going to have condensation, you're not going to have issues with the viscosity, so on and so forth. Additives are not going to suddenly disappear. So when you have, especially, I hear it a lot, people ask about a vehicle that's been sitting, I should naturally just dump everything, every petroleum-based product, I should get rid of it. There's a simple no to the question of, do you need to change the oil just because it's been sitting? When it comes to differentials, transmissions, transfer cases, don't worry about it, because these are simply systems that aren't going to be susceptible to any ill effects of the oil sitting. Now, engines, okay, this is going to be a little bit more involved. So if you have an engine that has an open breather, so this would apply to aircraft especially. This would apply to a lot of vehicles made prior to, you go back 70s, 60s, further back. But really, once you've made anything beyond 1980, you don't need to worry about open breathers by and large. So anything made beyond the 80s, it's generally a safe bet that those engines are going to be sealed up tight enough that corrosion, moisture buildup is not going to be a factor. However, if you are talking about aircraft, if you're talking about any sort of marine application, then you might want to consider changing the oil shortly after coming out of that winter storage period, because there is the possibility of corrosion, especially with aircraft. Warmer climates, yes, that can help quite a bit, but for a lot of folks who are storing aircraft in an area that is not so kind when it comes to moisture in the atmosphere, anything as far as, if you're deep south like Louisiana, Florida, you can run into corrosion being more of an issue. So you want to pay attention to that. And what you can do is not necessarily just dump the oil just because, it's been sitting. It's not so much that, but there is a possibility of corrosion, and washing that out of the system would be beneficial. So say you come out of that storage period, doing a shorter oil run than you typically go for wouldn't be a bad idea. In fact, we'd recommend that, especially when use is light. You don't want to give corrosion more of an opportunity to build up. That can inflate metals. It can be, hard to separate at times what's corrosion, what's poor wear. So when you come out of that period of sitting, if it's marine engine, if it is an aircraft engine, if it is an automotive engine that has an open breather, and that's important because that's what would allow moisture to build up, then it would be a good idea to just do a short oil run coming out of storage, help wash out whatever might have built up during that period of sitting. So an oil change simply, going into storage, not terribly necessary. Coming out of storage, it would be beneficial. Use a shorter oil run than you typically go for. That wouldn't be a bad idea. Something in the neighborhood of, if it's aircraft especially, 5 to 10 hours, maybe something a bit longer, but cutting it well short of what you typically do, is going to be a safe bet. Help clear out the system a little bit. But the nice thing is, if you have an engine that is made in the modern era, really, they're sealed up in such a way, we'll see questions come up all the time, folks mentioning that they believe or they're concerned, about condensation, and just fortunately, that's not a problem. So, if you have something like, I for some reason I just pictured someone with a Volvo, and it's been sitting in over the course of the winter, dumping out some really expensive fill of oil, just because the engine's been sitting. You hate to think of a waste there. Oil changes are expensive, and that's a big part of the reason that our business is such a help, is letting people know just how long they can run oil, just how much use they can get out of it. So you hate to think of the idea of someone, merely dumping that good oil out that doesn't have, much in the way of metal. Contamination's not an issue, and merely because of calendar time. And I know, there are expiration dates on the oil that you buy in the store, and just don't let that fool you. We've seen samples. I was looking at one today, and I believe it came out of a Silverado, relatively new one, but the customer mentioned that the oil had been in there for, I think, 24 months, I believe. And yeah, the calendar time can really stand out sometimes, just because, you go to a dealership or a quick change place, and you'll hear the spiel of 6 months, or you'll hear the 1 year if you're running synthetic, or it's generally pretty conservative. So it can shock people pretty often when we say, no, really, you can put calendar time aside. However, I will say that, for those with anxiety levels, anything like mine, about most things in life, if you want peace of mind, there's nothing wrong with that either. So how can you get peace of mind? Well, you could just change the oil and bite the bullet and absorb the money loss of putting new oil in. That would be fine. But if you are someone who an oil change is going to run you quite a bit more than $30, then it would be beneficial, I would think, to take a sample of engine oil without changing it. And remember, if your vehicle has a dipstick, you can just draw up a sample through the dipstick tube, using a hand pump. And that would save you from having to dump an entire fill. So I bring up $30. That is the current price for our standard analysis. I know for a lot of people out there, an oil change is going to generally be more than that. Especially if you have an engine that is, has an oil capacity of anything upwards of, 5 quarts or more, you can run into quite a bit more than $30. So if it would benefit you, especially, in these times where sitting can be a factor and you just want to have that look, your own set of eyes on the data, and you just want some good confirmation on your end of how things look, then you can also just take that sample, without changing. And not only can we speak to how the oil is holding up and how the engine is doing, we can also look at oil filtration, whether or not you need a new filter on there. That's another point of concern for a lot of folks is, I have no idea how long that oil filter's been on. I don't know, it's a recent purchase. And I don't know if the person changed that filter. We can also speak to oil filtration, using the insolubles test. And, there's another value there. So if you do want to see how things are going and you'd rather not dump out, 8 quarts of royal purple or whatever the flavor of the month is, I say flavor of the month kind of jokingly, but actually, you'd be surprised at the amount of people I've learned actually taste the engine oil. There's some real enthusiasts out there. I'm not kidding. I will take you inside real life for a moment here. There was a note I read, I think the other day. A customer mentioned, the oil looked black. It did not taste unusual. And at first, you want to separate your, someone pulling your leg from reality, but that one was a pretty convincing note. But anyway, if you want, all seriousness here, if you want to see how things are going and you'd rather save some money, consider taking that sample without changing the oil. Or you can also, adhere to mileage-based intervals, especially when you have a modern engine. If you are, if you've already built up trends, you've already seen how that engine looks on a consistent basis, and say everything I'm telling you right now, let's say that's old hat to you by now, but you weren't quite sure about the mileage coming out of a period of storage. Well, feel free to pursue your normal mileage-based goals, even with the vehicle sitting. That's fine too. So yeah, I think overall this is good news for a lot of folks out there. I think that of all the things we have to worry about right now, I think being able to simplify your maintenance, your vehicle, aircraft, boat maintenance, whatever it is, this can definitely make things easier. And, the overall takeaway here is never just assume that you have to get rid of engine oil, especially not transmission, differential. All this costs money. So consider running through some scenarios, if it, remember what kind of engine you have, when it was made. If it's anything up to snuff by our modern standards, think twice about dumping that oil. If it's anything made earlier than that, even so. It's not necessarily like dumping it as the first order of the day, unless that's totally doable for you. In that case, by all means, you'd be surprised to learn sometimes the lengths folks will go in taking care of their stuff. But yeah, think twice. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And if you want more detailed explanations for what we've seen as far as data goes, or you want specific examples of what we've seen for certain engines, obviously that's always something you can reach out and talk to us about. Any questions, feel free to send them our way. Thanks again to our listener of the show, supporter Daniel, for sending this question along, because I do believe that it's something a lot of people are going to be thinking about heading into winter. So that wraps up our talk on winter, the fact winter is coming, what do you need to do from a maintenance perspective. If you have any questions about what we covered today, please don't hesitate to reach out. This is Blackstone Joe signing off.